Hello, hello. Welcome to this corner of the internet. I hope it didn't take you too long to get here, or if it did, I hope your journey was an interesting one. You've probably guessed from seeing a single figure talk into a camera in front of some books that in this video we'll be addressing a topic of the utmost scholarly gravity. But in all seriousness, what I'm actually doing is just to give some advice and perspective that I wish I had had when I was first starting to learn about academic writing. I can't speak for you, but what would have been of help to me is a way to think about the writing process comprehensively that demystified some of its more anxiety-provoking elements and helped me find a way to ease into the process, starting with its most concrete parts. That's what I'm trying to do here. I'd encourage you to give what I'm suggesting a try and to see how it works for you. I'm making this video to be the first of a suite of videos about different parts of the writing process, though because I am confused by and terrified of Facetune, I don't know if I'll appear in many of them just sitting here narrating like this. But who knows? We may meet again. Happy writing.
This video has three main points. The first is a little intro to the writing process and the seminar's role in it. The second is where I'll be explaining the main way I talk about writing, which is through the metaphor of construction. Finally, I'll offer a little in the way of justification for the model. I'll talk about how I've found it's helpful. First things first, what are we doing here? We're talking about the art and craft of rhetorical writing. There are such romantic images of writing, like sitting in repose and just letting inspiration take you away. But writing can also be like this. You can be just staring there like the guy in the middle ground, looking out at the shrieking void of nothing on your page. That's a condition called blank screen anxiety. And it's not to be taken lightly. It affects us all. Writing gives us ups and downs, and we have to take the good with the bad. I can't promise the seminars will give you the vision and strength to surpass all your writing challenges. However, I hope the seminars can give you a reference you can use when you find yourself at a loss for how the process can work. I'm going to talk about putting an argument together, and I can't give you comprehensive directions, but a reference to the process as a whole that, on the basis of my experience trying and failing to produce cogent rhetoric, can help you figure out where you are and what you're doing. That's my hope for this and all of our seminars. I hope these discussions will help you in your human core and can furnish you with the theoretical modeling and practical experience that can introduce the glorious drudgery of academic writing as a whole. I also hope that as you hone your rhetorical crafts, you'll be able to critically engage with rhetoric that's all around us in new ways. As we collaborate in sharing our work and strengthening our arguments, I hope we can learn how to thoughtfully engage with rhetoric in the world, with the huge volume of what is said to be true and logical in marketing, in politics, in our work, and in our lives. I'm not saying writing seminars will make you a better citizen of the world, but I will work with you to cultivate a critical sensibility for how argument works that will apply to what you read and what you write. So, what does this approach to the writing process look like? Begging your indulgence, I found the best way I have to talk about the writing process is with an extended metaphor, but it's a simple one and it's a familiar one. To me, writing an argument is like building a building. We already use a lot of architectural metaphors when we talk about writing in general. We speak of making a case, we speak of scaffolding, we speak of rhetorical structure. The particular structure I use to help explain the process is the Pyramid of the Magician in Uxmal, Mexico. One reason is that it's one example of a particular style you see in Mesoamerica, so there are comparable cases that will help me illustrate other things later on. However, the main reason is its layers are highly stratified and differentiated, which will help me talk about the three constituent parts of an argument I believe in writing sequentially. The most important thing to do with a building, of course, is to lay the foundation. The foundation of a case is the evidence from our source material. I can't recommend strongly enough that the first thing you should write when you're arguing a case isn't actually your own thoughts or ideas, but the building blocks we'll construct those out of from our source material. At the basis of the argument, the evidence is specific cited references to another source. Evidence is either the exact words that appear in the source, or it's your paraphrase of that source. A paper needs both evidence that's directly quoted and evidence that's paraphrased. Anytime you refer to another source in an academic paper, you need to specifically cite that source in a way where a reader could find the quote or where the reader knows exactly what you're paraphrasing. Usually, but not always, citations give page numbers. The next layer, so to speak, is the analysis, reasoning, or interpretation. This is where you show how you are building upon what is written in the source, how your argument takes shape. This is how you express to us what the text means. It's essential, but it's not quite argument. Analysis is your interpretation of the evidence you cite. Once you have cited evidence, you need to explain what that evidence means and why that evidence has to do with the question you have been asked in the prompt of the essay. Analysis should not be restatement or summary, but your interpretive explanation of the cited evidence. Analysis should be written for readers who have, and for readers who have not, accessed the original source you're analyzing. In other words, academic writers can't assume their readers will have read their sources. In many cases, you'll have to introduce those sources. With that said, you will be wanting to interpret a particular part of the source rather than summarizing it in general. When you write a sentence of analysis, you should not provide a citation. This way, the reader knows it's you, the author, who is speaking, and not presenting only what appears in another source. The layer of analysis presents your own thoughts and ideas, just like the layers of rhetoric above the analysis. On the top of the rhetorical pyramid, you've got the actual rhetoric, the claims. You've got those statements that explain to us not just what's in the text and how you interpret it, but how you organize those items to make a particular point that matters. It matters not just to us who have read the source, but ideally to someone who has never accessed the text or the source at all. That's the convention of academic expository rhetoric. Rhetoric, argument, or claims make specific points that are both defensible with specific evidence and analysis, and that are controvertible. In other words, a reasonable reader of the same sources has to be able to disagree with what you've written. Prompted essays ought to give us questions that can produce different reasonable answers, and our answers ought to be distinct enough where someone with a reasonable different judgment can express disagreement. The main claim or thesis statement of an essay is a complete answer to the questions you're answering. The main claim is supported by all the subclaims, analysis, and evidence in the paper. Everything in the pyramid of the paper supports the main claim at the apex. So, to recap, the rhetorical pyramid is based in evidence. Gathering and arranging cited evidence ought to be the first step in the writing process. The next step of the pyramid is analysis of evidence, explaining and interpreting in your own words. Then, whether you're writing or pre-writing, you can start to construct arguments that answer the question on the basis of your analysis. Finally, the summit is the main claim. Typically, this is the last sentence of the first paragraph and any restatement thereof anywhere in the text. There's an aperture in this particular Maya pyramid at the top. A door is there. It's an opening. And for me, I use this to represent access to the argument. For me, this represents, in other words, the main claim. The main claim is the whole show that's up there. Perhaps you'll notice the topic sentences, which are like mini theses for paragraphs, are at both the analytical and rhetorical layers of the pyramid. Topic sentences are the connective superstructure of the building. Topic sentences connect the rhetoric of the main claim to the analysis of evidence in the body paragraphs. Because topic sentences serve a rhetorical role, I recommend writing them after you've written the body paragraph they're supposed to be on top of. I really do suggest writing like you build and laying the foundation of evidence first, then dealing with analysis and claims subsequently. This is what pre-writing looks like for me on the page. This is how I treat blank screen anxiety. It's by putting in the evidence or the easy stuff, the stuff that isn't my own ideas first. First, I will write the word title, and then I'll write the word sub, because I'll fill these in once the paper is all done at the end. I'll also put my name and a placeholder for the all-important introductory paragraph that's just intro. Likewise, I will just write the letters TS in brackets for the body paragraphs to remind myself to write some topic sentences once I'm done writing the actual bodies of the body paragraphs. The first thing I actually write in the paper is the citations. Where's my evidence? Let me look that up first. Then, once that's on the page, I'll start analyzing it, trying to stay as close to the source as I can. And then I'll try to sort out and rearrange the analysis into a structure that best fits the prompt of the essay that an argument can make sense of. So the first part of what I write is actually in the middle of the paper. And whatever I do not write the intro first. That's a very bad habit I can't discourage hard enough. If you absolutely must write that intro first, I would suggest you write it in red so that you don't hit submit without double checking it. But even then, I don't think it's a good idea at all to start with the intro, as we might have been taught to do in high school, not just because we might forget to check it once our argument is actually written, but because I think this approach promotes some unhelpful thinking about the writing process. Writing your thesis first can actually make blank screen anxiety worse, in that you're sitting down and immediately challenging yourself to write the most complex and important part of the paper right away, a task that is much too daunting and easily discouraging than simply looking at your highlighted book or your notes and asking what's going on in the source that you've taken those notes on. Where are the pages in the book that will help you answer the question? This is a question that can get us thinking about the foundations of the paper, and we can build from there, at least in my own experience. So, why do I use this metaphor to talk about the writing process? For me, thinking of the process in this way keeps us grounded, meaning if we start with evidence, our argument will never lack support. It is also much easier for most student writers to start with the stuff we have already done, which is reading and note-taking, which if we highlight or write page numbers, furnishes the evidence to analyze and argue from. This approach I find also keeps us balanced. One of the reasons I discourage writing the intro first is that it locks your mind into this one case and encourages you to just selectively glean evidence for that case, while ignoring evidence that argues against your point or that shows you that there's much more going on in the particular source. This selective sampling error represents the cardinal sin of the humanities and social sciences called cherry picking or quote mining, and it's all around us in op-ed pages and stump speeches. We don't want that in our own work. We rather want to build a case on the balance of evidence in the source. Lastly, this process encourages us to think about keeping our argument in line, all built up in the same direction. That is much easier to do when we build from the ground up. So for academic writers, this is the model I've got. But it's just a model. At best, it's a theoretical sketch that can give us some common vocabulary for reference in talking about the practice of the writing process.